Hey guys, before we start, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment if you have any feedback. Let's go to the story. I always knew birthdays weren't a big deal in my family, or at least, mine weren't. Growing up, I watched my sister have huge, elaborate birthday parties. Themed decorations, balloons filling the house, and mountains of gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Friends and family would gather, showering her with attention and making her feel like the most important person in the world. And then there was me. My birthdays were always an afterthought. A quiet dinner, sometimes not even that. Sometimes it was just a casual, "Oh yeah, happy birthday," from my mom while she rushed out the door. My dad would hand me a gift card at best, looking at his watch like he had somewhere else to be. I got used to it. I told myself it didn't matter. But this year was supposed to be different. For the first time in my life, I had something to celebrate. I had moved into my own place, a small but nice apartment that I worked my ass off to afford. I had a stable job, good friends, and for once, I felt like I was actually getting somewhere in life. So why not celebrate? It wasn't anything extravagant. Just a small dinner at my favorite restaurant, an intimate gathering where we could sit, eat, and enjoy each other's company. My parents, my sister, a couple of close friends. Nothing over the top. Just one night where I could finally feel like I mattered. Everyone said they'd be there. But when I arrived at the restaurant, the table was empty. At first, I wasn't worried. Maybe I was just early. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. I ordered a drink and checked my phone, expecting to see a bunch of "on our way" texts lighting up my screen. Nothing. I waited. Checked again. Still nothing. I sent a text to my mom first. No response. Then my dad. Nothing. My sister. Read. No reply. I started to feel it then, that creeping, sinking feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. I stared at the empty seats around me, the quiet hum of conversation from the other tables making me feel even more alone. Had I gotten the date wrong? No, that wasn't possible. I reminded them just yesterday. Maybe something had happened. Maybe there was an emergency. I pulled up social media, half expecting to see a post about a last-minute crisis. And that's when I saw it. My entire family, my parents, my sister, even some of my cousins, were out at dinner. Together. And not just anywhere. They were at another restaurant. Without me. The photo hit me like a punch to the stomach. My mom and dad, smiling. My sister, laughing. Plates of food spread across the table, drinks raised in a toast. And the caption? Family dinner. I felt my hands tighten around my phone. They hadn't forgotten. They hadn't lost track of time. They had made plans. Together. Without me. On my own birthday. I read the caption again as if maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe this was an old photo. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But the timestamp was fresh. Posted 20 minutes ago. My stomach twisted. I was sitting alone in a restaurant, waiting for them to show up, while they were somewhere else, celebrating without me. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. I swallowed the lump in my throat, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? Call them? Should I act like I had just stumbled upon the post and pretend it wasn't a slap in the face? I clenched my jaw, ignoring the stinging in my chest as I hit the call button. It rang twice before my mom answered. She sounded normal, casual, like nothing was wrong. "Oh, hey, honey," she said, her voice light. "What's up?" I forced my voice to stay steady. "Where are you?" There was a slight pause. Then she said, "Oh, we're just out for dinner." Like it was nothing. Like this wasn't the exact moment I realized just how little I meant to them. "For my birthday?" I said, my voice tight. Silence. Then she sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "Jeff, come on," she said. "We didn't think you'd want to make a big deal out of it." "A big deal?" I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "A big deal? I didn't ask for a party. I just wanted to have dinner. With my family." I heard my dad's voice in the background, laughing at something, completely unbothered. My sister was chatting away, too busy having a great time to even think about me. It was like I didn't exist. I closed my eyes. "So, you just decided not to come?" Mom hesitated. "Well, your sister picked the place, and we just kind of went along with it. That was it. No real explanation. No apology. Just excuses." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, a mix of anger and humiliation curling in my stomach. They had known. They had chosen. And they didn't care. I could hear it in her voice, the same dismissive tone she always used when she wanted me to let things go. Like this wasn't a big deal. Like I was overreacting. But I wasn't a kid anymore. I wasn't going to just swallow at this time. I wasn't going to pretend it didn't hurt. I exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table to keep my hand steady. "Got it," I said, my voice eerily calm. Message received. Then, Before she could say another word, I hung up. I stared at my untouched drink, at the empty seats around me, at the life I had spent years trying to build with people who didn't care. And for the first time, I let myself accept the truth. They didn't forget. They didn't get distracted. They had never planned on coming at all. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about one dinner. This was about years of being pushed aside, of being treated like I didn't matter. And now? Now, I was done. For good. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, staring at my phone screen. The image of my family at their dinner, the one I hadn't been invited to, was still there, the caption glowing mockingly under my fingertips. Family dinner. I shouldn't have been surprised. Not really. This wasn't the first time I had been pushed aside. It wasn't even the worst time. But for some reason, tonight, on my birthday, seeing them together, acting like I didn't exist, made something inside me snap. I had spent my whole life waiting for them to see me, to notice when I was hurting, to care when I was struggling, to celebrate when I had something worth celebrating. But they never did, and I had let them get away with it. For years. I exhaled, rubbing a hand over my face, my mind racing. I thought back to all the little moments. The ones that, on their own, hadn't seemed like much. For example, when I graduated high school and my sister got a weekend trip with my parents to celebrate her finishing middle school, while I got a congrats and a pat on the back. Or the time I saved up to buy my first car, a used sedan that barely ran, while my dad pulled every string to get my sister a brand new car for her birthday. Or all the birthdays before this one, the ones where they technically acknowledged me but never celebrated me. It had always been like this. But I had told myself it didn't matter. That if I just kept showing up, if I just kept proving myself, maybe one day they'd finally look at me and see someone worth making an effort for. Tonight, I realized that day would never come. I turned on my car, gripping the wheel tightly as I drove home. My phone buzzed once, a text from my mom, but I didn't check it. I already knew what it would say. Some half-baked excuse. Something to make me feel like the bad guy for being upset. When I pulled into my parking spot outside my apartment, I finally looked. Mom, Jeff, please don't be like this. You know we love you. It was just dinner. Just dinner. Just one more time, I wasn't important enough. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. Me. You made your choice. I get it now. I didn't wait for a response. I silenced my phone, tossed it onto the couch, and sank down into a chair. The weight of everything was pressing down on me now. I had spent so many years hoping. Now, I just felt tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of giving them the benefit of the doubt. Tired of pretending like it was normal for your own family to forget about you. It wasn't normal. It was just how they were. And I was finally done pretending that I was okay with it. The next day, I didn't reach out. I didn't text first, like I always did. I didn't check if they had responded to my last message. I just lived my life. I went to work, made plans with my friends, and bought myself a birthday gift. Something small, but just for me. For once, I didn't wait for my family to tell me I mattered. I told myself. But of course, my family didn't let things go that easily. By day 2, my sister had texted me. Sister, so, you're ignoring us now? LOL, okay. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just mockery. I didn't reply. By day 3, my dad sent a message. Dad, your mom is upset. Call her. Not, hey, Jeff, sorry we forgot your birthday. Not, we should talk. Just a demand. I didn't call. By day 4, my mom sent another text. Mom, I don't know why you're acting like this. It was just a misunderstanding. Let's move on. I almost laughed. A misunderstanding? They didn't forget. They had made plans. They had picked a restaurant, gotten dressed, sat down, and enjoyed a night out, while I was waiting alone, wondering why no one had shown up. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a decision. And I was making mine now. So I typed back the only response they deserved. Me. I'm done trying to be part of a family that doesn't want me. Then I put my phone down, exhaled slowly, and let myself feel everything. The anger, the hurt, the sadness. And then, beneath it all, relief. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't chasing them. I was just done. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. That was the best birthday gift I could have given myself. I expected my message to end things. To be the final word. I had made myself clear. I was done trying to be part of a family that didn't want me. But of course, my family wasn't the type to just accept that. Because on day 5, the guilt trip began. I was at work, halfway through my lunch, when my phone buzzed. Mom, Jeff, I don't know what's gotten into you. We're your family. We've always been there for you. You're overreacting. I stared at the screen, chewing slowly, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. Always been there for me? I scrolled up, looked at her last few messages. It was just dinner. You know we love you. Let's move on. Not once had she said, I'm sorry. Not once had she said, we should have been there for you. No. Instead, I was the one being dramatic. I set my phone down, exhaling slowly, trying to push past the familiar pull of guilt. Because that's how it always was with them. They did something hurtful. I got upset. And somehow, I always ended up being the bad guy. I knew how this worked. And this time, I wasn't falling for it. I didn't respond. And that silence must have driven them insane, because by the time I got home that night, my sister had chimed in. Sister, Mom's crying. I hope you're happy. There it was. The classic emotional manipulation. I could picture it so clearly. My mom, on the couch, sighing dramatically, dabbing at her eyes while my dad sat beside her, shaking his head, talking about how I was tearing this family apart. How I was the one hurting them. How I was being selfish. I clenched my jaw, my fingers tightening around my phone. I had spent years letting them paint me as the problem. Years of apologizing for things that weren't my fault. Years of convincing myself that if I just let things go, if I just tried harder, if I just made less of a fuss, they would finally see me. But they never did. And now, I was finally seeing them. I let out a breath. Typed back. Me. If she's crying, that's on her. I didn't do anything. Then I turned off my phone. Because I wasn't playing this game anymore. The next morning, my dad called. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text popped up. Dad, you need to stop this. You're making your mother sick with worry. We've done nothing but love you, and this is how you repay us. I clenched my jaw, rolling my eyes. Love? Love wasn't forgetting my birthday. Love wasn't prioritizing my sister over me every single time. Love wasn't making me feel like an outsider in my own family. But to them, love wasn't about actions. It was about obedience. It was about doing what they were expected to do without question. It was about accepting whatever crumbs they gave me and being grateful for it. And now that I was finally setting a boundary, they couldn't handle it. I didn't reply, because I was done explaining myself. That night, my mom tried a new tactic. This time, she sent a long, emotional message, the kind that would have wrecked me a year ago. Mom, I don't know where I went wrong with you. I've given you everything, and yet, you still act like I'm the villain. I have always done my best, but I guess that wasn't good enough for you. I just hope you realize one day that family is all that matters. And when you do, I hope it's not too late. I let out a slow breath, staring at the screen. There it was. The final push. The twist of the knife. She had flipped it, turned herself into the victim, turned me into the cold, ungrateful son who had abandoned his loving mother. But it didn't work. Not this time. Because I knew the truth now. She hadn't given me everything. She had given me just enough to keep me coming back, to keep me desperate for more. And now that I wasn't playing along, she wanted me to feel like the villain. I took a deep breath. Then I typed back one last message. Me, I never said you weren't good enough. I just said I was tired of being treated like I wasn't. If you cared, you'd be listening. But you're not. So I'm done. And then, before I could second-guess myself, I had sinned, muted the conversation, and set my phone down. No guilt, no regret, just relief. Because I had finally done it. I had finally stopped chasing them. The silence lasted a week, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, they had finally gotten the message. That I was serious. That I was done playing along. But, of course, I should have known better. On day 7, my sister decided to get involved. I was in the middle of grocery shopping when my phone buzzed. Sister, okay, enough. This has gone too far. You're embarrassing the family. I rolled my eyes, shoving a box of cereal into my cart. Embarrassing the family? That was rich, coming from someone who had just spent the past week ignoring what actually happened and siding with our parents like a blind loyalist. I ignored the message. But she wasn't done. Another text popped up. Sister, seriously, grow up. You're making Mom miserable. And for what? Because we had dinner without you? Get over it. I paused mid-step, my grip tightening around my cart handle. That was the moment it finally hit me. She didn't care. She had never cared. She had spent her whole life being the golden child, basking in our parents' attention while I was shoved to the sidelines. And now, she couldn't understand why I was upset. Because in her world, I had never mattered enough for this to be a big deal. And that realization? That was liberating. I exhaled, let out a small laugh, and typed back. Me. Thanks for proving my point. I didn't wait for a response. I turned off my phone, finished my shopping, and went home. Because I wasn't wasting another second on people who refused to see the truth. That should have been the end of it. It should have stopped there. But 2 days later, something happened that I did not expect. I came home from work to find a familiar car parked outside my apartment building. My parents' car. I stopped dead in my tracks, my pulse spiking. They showed up. For a split second, I considered turning around, getting back in my car, and driving somewhere, anywhere, just to avoid them. But then I exhaled sharply, clenched my jaw, and walked toward the building. I wasn't running from them. Not anymore. As soon as I got inside, I found them waiting in the lobby. My mom looked up, eyes red-rimmed, face tight with forced sadness. My dad stood stiffly beside her, arms crossed, his expression hard. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to confront me. I stopped a few feet away, crossing my arms over my chest. "What are you doing here?" I asked flatly. Mom sniffled. "Jeff, please. We need to talk." I stared at her, waiting. "So talk." She hesitated. "Not like this. Let's go upstairs." I let out a cold laugh. "No." She flinched as if she hadn't expected that, as if she really thought she could just show up unannounced, demand to be let in, and I'd just fold like always. "Not this time." "Jeff," my dad said, his voice low and firm. "Enough with this childish behavior. You've made your point. Now, let's sit down and figure this out." My fingers curled into fists. "I already figured it out," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You just don't like the answer." Mom took a shaky breath, her expression twisting into something desperate. "We didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "We just didn't think it was a big deal." I scoffed. "Yeah, that much was clear." Silence. A heavy, undeniable silence. And then, finally, my dad lost his patience. "Jesus, Jeff, stop acting like a damn victim," he snapped. "You think you're the only person who's ever been left out of something? You're not a child. You're an adult. Move on." I stared at him, feeling a slow, cold anger settle in my chest. He didn't see it. He still didn't see it. And he never would. I shook my head. I already did. Mom's face crumpled. "Jeff, please." "No," I cut her off. "I'm done." I turned to leave. My dad's voice stopped me. "You walk out that door, you don't come back." I paused, letting the words sink in. Then, I turned back and met his gaze head on. "That's the best thing you've ever given me." Then I walked away, and I didn't look back. When I got back to my apartment, I sat in the silence, my heart pounding. For years, I had imagined this moment. The moment where I finally stood up for myself. The moment I stopped letting them dictate my worth. And now, it had finally happened. And you know what? I wasn't sad. I wasn't broken. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just free. Because I had finally, let them go. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was missing anything at all. The silence that followed should have felt empty. But it didn't. It felt peaceful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for them to call. I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. I wasn't waiting to be chosen by people who had already decided I wasn't worth their effort. I had chosen myself. And it felt damn good. But, of course, my family didn't let go that easily. Because exactly 1 week after I walked away, they did what they always did. They tried to rewrite the story. It started with Facebook. I hadn't blocked them yet. I hadn't even thought about it. But when I opened the app that morning, their posts were the first thing I saw. Mom's status. Some people forget where they come from. They turn their backs on the people who raised them, who sacrificed for them. "I will always love my children, even the ones who no longer love me." Dad's post wasn't far behind. Family is supposed to be forever. It's a shame when people throw that away over nothing. And then, the final piece, my sister, chiming in, as if they had all planned this together. I never thought I'd see the day when my own brother would abandon us. We all make mistakes, but real family forgives. I guess not everyone understands that. My blood boiled. They weren't just trying to guilt trip me privately anymore. Now, they were trying to turn everyone against me. And the worst part? It was working. The comment sections were filled with supporters. "Oh, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Kids these days are so ungrateful. You're a great mom. Don't blame yourself." I clenched my jaw, my stomach twisting. They had erased everything that had actually happened. They had painted themselves as the victims, and me as the cruel, heartless son who had just cut them off for no reason. And the longer I stared at those posts, the more I realized something. They weren't sad. They weren't heartbroken. They were performing. Because if they had actually cared about me, if they had actually been sorry, they wouldn't be making a public spectacle out of it. They would have apologized to me directly. But that wasn't what they wanted. They didn't want to fix things. They wanted control. They wanted to make sure everyone saw them as the loving, perfect parents who had done everything right, and me as the selfish, ungrateful son who had turned his back on them for no reason. It was manipulation, plain and simple. And for the first time in my life, I didn't fall for it. I didn't comment. I didn't call. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I did the one thing I knew would drive them insane. I blocked them. I blocked them all. My mom, my dad, my sister. Every extended family member jumped into the comments to back them up. And the moment I did, I felt something incredible. Relief. Because I finally understood that I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't have to prove myself. I knew the truth. And that was enough. The next day, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in years. I made coffee, went for a run, and spent the afternoon actually enjoying my own company instead of waiting for someone to prove that I mattered. And when my phone buzzed later that evening, it wasn't my family. It was a friend, someone who had actually remembered my birthday, who had reached out just to check in. "Hey man, have you been? You want to grab a drink?" I smiled. Yes, I did. Because I finally understood something. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up. And the people who truly cared, they were still here. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No more waiting for them to care. No more hoping for something that was never going to happen. No more waking up with that dull, heavy weight in my chest. I had spent years convincing myself that if I was patient enough, forgiving enough, easygoing enough, if I just kept showing up, eventually, they'd see me. But they never did. And now, for the first time, I wasn't looking for them anymore. Instead, I was looking at the people who had actually been there. The people who had texted me on my birthday. The people had actually checked in instead of waiting for me to come to them. The people who cared, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And the more time I spent with them, the more I realized something. This was what family was supposed to feel like. It was supposed to feel safe. It was supposed to feel effortless. It was supposed to feel like you mattered without having to prove that you did. And for the first time, I wasn't clinging to people who made me feel invisible. I was surrounding myself with people who actually saw me. And then, just when I thought it was finally over, my family did something I didn't expect. They showed up, not in a text, not in a call, not in another dramatic Facebook post. They showed up at my door. I had just gotten home from work, carrying a grocery bag in one hand, scrolling through my phone with the other. And then, as I rounded the corner of my apartment building, I froze. Because standing outside my door, arms crossed, faces set, were my parents. My stomach dropped. I hadn't spoken to them in weeks, hadn't responded to their texts, hadn't given them the reaction they wanted. And now, here they were, waiting, like they could just ambush me into a conversation I never agreed to have. For a split second, my old instinct kicked in. I should hear them out. I should be polite. I should let them say their piece. But then I remembered everything. The forgotten birthdays. The constant dismissals. The way they had made me feel like I was overreacting, like I was the one in the wrong for expecting the bare minimum. And suddenly, I didn't owe them anything. So, instead of walking over, I stayed where I was, watching them, waiting, seeing if they'd be the ones to make the first move. And, of course, they did. My mom spotted me first. Her face lit up with immediate relief, like I was the one who had gone missing. "Jeff," she called out, stepping forward. "We've been waiting for you. Let's go inside and talk." I raised an eyebrow. Go inside? Like they could just waltz into my home and demand a conversation whenever they felt like it? I shook my head. "No." She blinked, clearly caught off guard. "No." I crossed my arms. "I didn't invite you here." My dad, who had been standing stiffly beside her, let out a sharp breath. "Jesus, Jeff, can you stop acting like a child for 5 seconds? And there it was. The real reason they were here. Not because they regretted anything. Not because they wanted to make things right. Not because they had finally realized how much they had hurt me. No, they were here to control the narrative. To make sure they weren't the bad guys. To make sure I wasn't allowed to walk away. And suddenly, I knew exactly how this was going to go. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to win. Mom's voice softened. "Jeff, please. You don't have to do this. We're family." I tilted my head. "Funny. You didn't remember that a few weeks ago." She flinched. "That's not fair." I scoffed. "No? Because it felt pretty fair when I was sitting alone at my own birthday dinner." Dad groaned. "Oh my God, are we still on that?" I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, actually. We are." Mom reached for my arm, her expression pleading. "We made a mistake. But don't throw away everything over one misunderstanding." I pulled back. It wasn't one misunderstanding. It was a lifetime of them. Silence. A long, heavy silence. For the first time, I could see it in their faces. They didn't know what to do. Because I wasn't reacting the way I used to. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't letting it go. I was just done. And that terrified them. Dad was the first to recover. His voice was clipped, frustrated now. "Look, let's just stop this nonsense and move on." I let out a cold laugh. "Move on." I echoed. "You mean, pretend this never happened? Go back to normal so you don't have to deal with it. Mom's face hardened. We're trying, Jeff. But you're making this impossible. And that was when I knew. They still didn't get it. They had come all this way, stood outside my apartment, waited for me to get home. And still, it wasn't about fixing things. It was about control. I sighed. You're right. This is impossible. Mom's eyes brightened for a second, like she thought I was finally giving in. Then I said the words I should have said years ago. Because I'm done trying. Silence. A thick, stunned silence. For the first time, they looked nervous. Like they were actually afraid they had pushed me too far. I took a deep breath. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want to sit here and list every reason why I deserve to be treated better. I shouldn't have to convince my own parents that I matter. Mom's lip trembled. Of course you matter. I smiled. No, I said simply. I don't. I turned, pulling out my keys. Dad's voice stopped me. If you walk inside that door, don't expect us to be here when you come back. I stilled. Then, slowly, I turned back to them. And I smiled. That's exactly the point. Then I walked inside. And this time, I didn't look back. I expected to feel something when I closed the door behind me. A sting of regret. A flicker of doubt. But instead, I felt nothing. No guilt. No sadness. No urge to turn back. Just quiet. Just relief. Because for the first time in my life, I had chosen myself over them. And it felt good. The silence that followed was deafening. For days, I didn't hear from them. No texts. No calls. No dramatic Facebook posts. And I knew why. They were waiting. They thought I'd break first. They thought I'd come crawling back, like I always did. But I didn't. I went to work. I hung out with friends. I started spending time with people who actually valued me. And every day that passed, I felt lighter. Like I had finally set down a burden I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. Like I had finally stopped chasing people who were never going to catch me. And then, 2 weeks later, the final message came. Not from my mom. Not from my dad. Not from my sister. From my aunt. She had never been directly involved in our family drama. She mostly stayed out of things, only popping up on holidays or birthdays. But now? Now, she was meddling. Her message was short. Jeff, I just wanted to reach out. Your mom is devastated. Your dad is angry, but I think it's because he's hurt. They miss you. Maybe it's time to put this behind you. I stared at the screen, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. Because I had heard those words before. They miss you. They're hurt. Just let it go. It was never about me. Never about how I felt. It was always about making sure they weren't uncomfortable. Making sure I was the one who bent first. And suddenly, I realized something. They weren't going to change. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Because to them, this wasn't about fixing things. It was about winning. And the only way they knew how to win was by making me feel like the villain. I exhaled slowly. Then, without hesitation, I typed back. I'm happy now. Nothing more. Nothing less. Because that was the truth. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for my family to decide I was worth their love. I had already found it in myself. It's been a year since I walked away. A year of no calls, no texts, no forced reunions. And you know what? I've never been happier. I stopped waiting for people to care about me. I stopped apologizing for wanting more. I stopped convincing myself that I had to earn the love that should have been freely given. And in doing so, I gained something I never thought I'd have. Peace. Because the truth is, family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up for you. And when I stopped looking for love in the places it didn't exist, I found it everywhere else.